I will be calling to order the Property and Planning Subcommittee meeting for today. I'm going to try to adjust this chair because I feel like it's sinking down. There we go. We have one item on the agenda this afternoon, which is to discuss the Winston Thomas site plan for a proposed new building. So I'm assuming Vic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So what we're here to talk about, and here comes Don Griffin, our deputy mayor. Hi, Don. Don is joining us as well. I know he has limited time, but he's here just to be here on behalf of the mayor's office. A couple of years ago, we instigated the development of a master plan for redevelopment of the Winston Thomas site. The concept was to look at the possibility of relocating our operations down there. Basically, we're bursting at the seams here. This building is not large enough for our operations. The garage is certainly not large enough for our operations. We have vac trucks parked in the parking lot in the rain. We just gotten to the point where we can't fit all our big equipment indoors anymore. We also don't have a covered area to store materials like pipes and things like that. So we have a lot of materials that are basically sitting out in a field at Winston Thomas. We send people out there to mow, and things are just sitting in the weather. Plastic pipe can't sit in the sunshine. Sunshine is damaging to plastic pipe. So we did this master plan, and we've been considering the prospect of moving forward with the next phase. So I wanted to talk with the subcommittee to discuss our expectation that we will be bringing to the board in coming weeks a proposal to hire a contractor to do an actual architectural design for the project. We've been talking with the mayor's office. The mayor is supportive of this initiative. This property is not large enough for us to expand on this corner, and there are other city facilities that would be able to relocate into this building. So we would presumably sell it or lease it. That's still to be determined. So basically, the process that that we're proposing would be that we would go ahead with a site design, an architectural design for the facilities, identify what the cost would be. There's dirt to be moved. There's stuff that's going to have to be compacted. There's a lot of things to be done down at the site. I don't know, have any of you toured the Winston Thomas site? I know Kirk has. It would be useful to get the board members to take a look at the site. It has a lot of opportunities for us down the road, and we could expand as well in the future. So what we'd like to do at this point is bring a contract to the board for doing the site design. At that point, we would know what things were going to cost, and we would be working with the controller's office and the people downtown to figure out who would pay what for what and how we would fund it. Obviously, if it's going to be partially bond funded on the water side, we have to go to IURC for approval before we can move ahead with the project. So there are a lot of moving parts here and a lot of complexities. But the first one would be to move ahead with a site design. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, to broach the idea with you all about what kind of questions you might have about us doing that. We're not asking for a resolution at this point, only to report that we're going to be bringing a contract forward for a site design, and then that would be debated by the board at that time. And we would bring it back to this committee before we did take it to the board. Don, would you like to say anything?
No, only, hi folks, how you doing? Don Griffin. I'll scoot up here a little bit. I'm the deputy mayor for the city of Bloomington, and we're excited for this opportunity. I guess you can tell them a little bit about the history of Winston Thomas as well. It's got some significant Bloomington history, the namesake of that. But we are busting at the seams here. I've had a chance to tour the Winston Thomas site and seen the storage. I've seen the when we're talking about those plastic, you imagine the corrugated pipe that you'd have underneath your, in your yard, but we're talking about massive corrugated plastic piping that has a shelf life when it's left out in the elements like that. So you're talking, tons of money being wasted, not wasted. I don't want to say wasted, but we could better preserve the assets that we have. And this just makes a lot of sense. We do have other departments that are that could use this space, and then there's other opportunities down there at Winston-Thomas that would not only help your folks, but we've got some needs in fire and police, so that could come later. But no, we support this project, or at least going forward with this project, 100%.
Thank you.
Is that's doable?
Unless you have any questions.
Yeah, you guys have any questions for me?
So are there questions?
I can move ahead with an explanation of what we're thinking and look at some of the stuff that's in the master plan. I know you've got hard copies of it and you got PDFs last week. So the Winston-Thomas property, that was our wastewater plant for the city for many, many years, roughly until the PCB crisis began. We built the Dillman plant and moved over there in 1983, and at that point, the Winston-Thomas was closed, and it's been basically in the same condition ever since. It's a picture of the superintendent's house. This is actually where the superintendent lived. Today, you can't see it because there's so much stuff growing around it, but it's a historic building that we would hope to preserve through whatever project we were to do down there. If you look at the aerial photograph here of the site, the PCBs that were detected at this plant are encapsulated in this berm right here. Basically, what we've been doing is and I know we've talked about this with the board before, basically from north of the berm northward, this area would be available for development for first responders, so the police and fire training centers.
I'm asking you a question.
Yeah.
Turn the lights down a little. I can't
Oh,
see what you're pointing at.
Sorry.
Are you using your mouse to indicate something?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, we can't see.
Yeah, I can't see what
It's
you're.
too bright. Yeah. Hey, my mouse, there it is. Let me make my mouse bigger. Oh, good grief. No. It's a trackpad. And how do I make it big? Can you see it now? Can you see it? Okay, good, okay. So
Can you go back and show us that? Okay,
This-
that green
this-
area there.
this is where the PCBs have been encapsulated that were found there. The site was on the national priorities list, the Superfund NPL, for many years. It is no longer. In fact, we're free to redevelop the whole site as we see fit. We really don't want to dig on the on the berm, though, so we're basically staying away from there. And the idea would be that north of the berm would be available for police and fire and other first responders and other activities that would be suitable there. Our water station, bulk water station, is located right here. And then south of the berm would be all the way down to Gordon Pike would be available for CBU to redevelop. And this portion down here in the southwestern corner, this is on floodplain down here, so we couldn't build anything there, but we could all around up here. The historical gate is located right down here. There's a nice limestone gate that was relocated several years ago when they widened Gordon Pike. John Langley led that project. It took more time than you would have suspected to move a limestone gate, but they did. This entire area would be, would
Thank
be.
you. Okay,
So, and pardon if this is jumping ahead, you could just say, I'll get to
Okay.
that. So if we're talking about the north area could be redeveloped for fire and police, if there were needs for expansion later on down the line with the new project on the south end, would we have possibly needed that area for CBU? Is that something that we would sell to police and fire, or would CBU like lease the land, or what would you expect for that?
I believe what we've done previously was lease it, is that right? I believe it's been leased for $1 a year or something like that, right? Yeah.
And then, I guess separate, but on the same line. So this property, though, this current building and property would be sold to another city entity
Oh, the building here?
currently here to help pay for that project
Yeah. But it'd either be,
Either sold or leased, but yes.
at a market value or something. Okay.
I'm going to jump in.
Okay.
I currently can't say without looking exactly how this property is owned, whether it's by Utility Service Board or by City of Bloomington.
Okay.
And then regardless of how it's actually titled, it's still all the city. And if the city's going to continue and use the city's property, then it's hard to imagine money changing hands unless we maybe were to negotiate it through like the annual intergovernmental agreement that we have, if that was how it was going to be negotiated. But it's all still, we're all the city, and it would have to be a friendly negotiation with the city if there was going to be any kind of exchange.
Okay. I was just thinking if we have our own budget that we do for CBU, that's, thank you.
yeah, and this property is titled as City of Bloomington. It's not Utility Service Board.
Did you look
However,
that up, Vic?
no, I looked it up years ago.
Okay.
However, the building was constructed with ratepayer dollars.
Okay.
So it's our building, but it's not our dirt. So, so it's kind of complicated, but that would all be part of, whatever negotiations we'd have to do to decide how to fund the project. But I think both the mayor's office and CBU would be, and the USB would be involved in that discussion. That wouldn't be entirely up to us to deal with.
And then to follow up on that question, so thank you for asking that about this building. The other property, just for clarification, is that city property? Is that CBU property?
It's all city property.
It's all city property.
But I believe the deed says Utility Service Board for the Winston Thomas property. But we're still all the city.
Okay.
So if you were to ever have to dispose of property to sell it to a third party, not the city, those funds would always go to the city, is that correct?
Well, if the property were deeded to, if the owner was listed as the Utility Service Board, I believe the funds would accrue to the Utilities Department. Is that right, Chris?
It depends on which way the wind is blowing on the day that we do it.
Well, it's a big deal to our
I can appreciate that. It greatly depends upon what money might have been used to purchase the property in the first place. That really, I think, becomes the essence of the question, because if ratepayer money is used to purchase the property, then I would expect, and most of this would have been historically accomplished, but if ratepayer money has been used to purchase the property, I personally today would expect that that deed would reflect that it is the Utility Service Board that purchased the property, so that it's easily delineated for us to know. We would still want to know that answer, though, because if we used ratepayer money to purchase the property, then I would anticipate that the sale of that property later, assuming that it went outside of the city, would stay in our coffers. And if it was going to be transferred within the city, that there would be some kind of payback to the ratepayers for that original cost. Does that make sense?
It does, however, the Utility Service Board is very rarely listed on these deeds. We were only in.
You are on occasion listed on them.
Okay, well, in my experience in reviewing the properties, maybe 10 years ago, we did the whole list, and a lot of times it's City of Bloomington Utilities Department is the listed owner.
Okay.
And
but that's-
very rarely is it the Utility Service Board.
Yeah, you're right. There are times when it does show as the department that owns it, which, again, I think that's an incorrect way to handle it, but that would have happened prior to me being around. This board is the governmental entity, quote unquote, that handles those property transactions and should be signing those property transactions. So it should be this board that's listed as the owner.
And we've talked about cleaning up those deeds several times, and it's never happened. So this is just a general issue that needs to be resolved for a number of reasons when we have the wherewithal or make it a priority to do so.
With this particular site, it's important to remember that the Winston Thomas plant, before there even was a CBU, right? And in fact, I believe it probably, at the time, the water department was not part of the city, but maybe the sewer department was. But at any rate, the sewer plant that was built on this property had to have been built by the ratepayers that served that it served. So I would presume that the Winston Thomas property would, absent some other finding, it would definitely be, if we were to sell it, but we're not going to sell it because there's no other land like this in the area. So, but this was built a long time ago, in the 1920s. Is that right? Something like that. It was in the 1934 is when it opened. So there was no CBU at that time. And it was way out in the country at the time, too. So
On Elevate, the property that we're looking at, where we would construct, shows that it's the Utility Service Board of the City of Bloomington that is the owner.
So that's been
It
cleaned
becomes
up.
very easy for us in our contemplation for construction.
Gotcha.
And I would surmise, though I'm speaking out of turn, that at the time that we would sell is not really the right word for this, but when we would vacate this property and turn it over to another department in the city, I would like to think that through negotiations, there would be some compensation back to the Utility Service Board, back to the City of Bloomington Utilities Department, for whatever the value of this building might be determined to be today. That would be the negotiation I would hope we would have with the controller and the
This
city.
property. This property, you're saying?
This building, yeah, anything that we're vacating here that we had used ratepayer money to construct.
And you said this property is deeded to Utility Service
This
Board?
property here, no,
It's the
this
city.
property is the City of Bloomington that owned it,
Right.
and the City of Bloomington allowed us, not allowed, but we constructed our building on the city's property.
Right.
Yeah, again, we're all one big happy family, but.
Except we have
It all-
ratepayers,
it
a
all
set of
dep-
ratepayers that differ from those who live in the city limits,
Agreed.
and that's the issue.
But the
So we have to
ratepayer-
keep that in mind.
Well, I've
I'm
explained-
on board with you 100%.
Okay.
When there have been ratepayer dollars spent, then we should the negotiations should contemplate reimbursement to the ratepayers when we are no longer using that asset. If it's going to be on the fair market and sold to outside parties, or if it's going to be transferred within the city, ratepayers should expect a fair return on what they invested in the first place. That's the negotiation I would expect we would have at the time that we vacate.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry.
And that's actually, by the way, that's how the controller explained it to me when I've spoken to him about it.
And then Vic, you also mentioned that section of property that's north of the berm, is that, and you said that was for police and fire, is that a project that is happening, or
Well,
is?
So this building exists. This is the police training facility.
Right.
This building is the old incinerator that we tore down a couple of years ago. And just north of there is now an additional police facility. And then the fire department has their training tower here that they moved it to another location, but they're going to be moving back.
Okay,
to
so
the
that's
Winston Tower.
already there.
Yes, that's
Okay.
already there.
But
So
that,
if
that area then that's to what I'm assuming is the west, that brown area, what is that?
So that's all part of the same property. Weirdly, FEMA has mapped this as being floodplain. The reason they've mapped, we think the reason they mapped it as floodplain is that if you look at old air photos, there was a sludge lagoon there, but it was never on the floodplain. It was always above the floodplain. So we're working right now. Our people at EPA have helped us make contact because we'd like to get that designated as not being in floodplain so that it can be filled and developed as well. But that's right now, it's just landfill up there.
But in that area, that brown area on there, is that potentially going to be expanded for police and fire?
Yeah,
Okay.
potentially could be,
So
yes.
that's nothing's been under contract right now for that. That's just
No.
a proposal of how it would get
No.
used. Okay, thank you. I just needed that clarified.
And at some point, we'll want to have a conversation in the future about this portion of the parcel. This is getting a little bit of far afield of the master plan, but this portion of the parcel here has frontage on Walnut Street. So there may be a different application for this portion of the property, but we have not contemplated whether that would be something we would do or whether that would be done downtown. But that frontage on Walnut Street might be useful for something else.
Okay, thank
So-
you.
And would those properties be connected with an access or a service road? To me, it looks like the fire police would be accessed from Walnut, and then the utilities would be accessed from Ford and Pike. Is
Well,
that-
you can actually, right now, there is a grungy dirt road that you can drive right through the whole site.
Okay.
You can drive through it.
But not like public access.
It's not public access at this
One more
point.
question since we're on that. In the report, I saw where, that there was like dumping of waste, and the need like to gate it off. I know this is 2 years old. Is that something that is still a problem? And do we need to put up gates to stop the dumping until we get a project going?
So the dumping of wastes, it's actually dumping of spoils, and the people who are dumping are Public Works and CBU.
Okay.
So these are spoils from, say they go out and they mill a piece of road, the milling spoils will end up down there, or sometimes there'll be spoils from one of the projects we do that'll end up down there. So it's not like somebody's out there throwing garbage.
Okay.
But what happens though is if we want to, this is an issue that the James Hall's been bringing up, and we've had conversations with Public Works, is that some of those areas are going to have to be potentially dug up and compacted if they're going to be reused. So there's a discussion to be had about how that all happens too, how the land, the grading and the redevelopment of the land itself takes place.
And how often are things dumped there? Every day, every week?
Every day.
Okay, so if there's, if this is a project that we decide to move forward with, should we continue dumping there for the next, for this duration, or should we?
It's exactly the conversation we had last week, is to try and find a new location for the city to be dumping spoils like that. That this is not a suitable place. If it's going to eventually be redeveloped, it's probably not a good place, regardless of what you're going to build there.
Right.
To do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we've started that conversation with the folks at City Hall.
Did you mention, were you saying the photo's 2 years old or the report's 2 years old?
The report was
The
from
report.
August of 2020.
Oh, yeah, wasn't aware of that. So there's all these questions about the photo and the site plan. If we just took this in PowerPoint and marked it up, that'd be really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify
Well,
everything that's been discussed thus far.
I think it's actually in later pages. If it's
Not so
we can-
well,
But we
no.
can mark it up. We'll mark it
Yeah,
up.
that
Yep.
that'd be real helpful.
Okay,
Yeah, I didn't see it.
okay. Well, there's.
Okay, Vic, should we let Vic continue a little bit here on some more of the?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great questions, everybody, though. This is I had similar questions too, so, all right.
So this is the current, is this the current state? Yeah, so this has all been mapped. Here's the mapped floodplain that's off to the west of the portion that's south of the berm, and then here's the portion that you see is marked as floodplain, even though the PCB berm is actually in the midst of that.
Really chopped on our version.
Is it?
It's-
Page 19.
We're just seeing a small part of that, I
Oh,
believe. A lot of the.
It's in the PDF, that's,
Okay. Yeah, there's not page numbers on this. We could insert those. There's no figure numbers. It's a little bit difficult to navigate.
I can't find that one at all.
I think it shows about a quarter of it in
okay,
what was
we
enlarged.
can get that
This is
reprinted.
This
This,
page.
yeah,
Okay, this is what
I mean,
we
that's what
have.
we got.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Okay, it's like, we're like, we don't have this. It's this
Okay.
one.
I apologize for that. This, basically, I just wanted to show, this is where that area that's marked as floodway is on the north portion of the property. On the south portion of the property, it's basically right near Clear Creek and on to the west of there. And actually, you can't even see it on this. It's light blue, this hatched light blue area, it's hard to see. So as we move down through this, getting down to the images that show potentially where we would locate. There's a whole bunch of pages in here that are basically the results of discussions between the CRIPE, the architects, with all of the different CBU departments, to talking to all of our people about what we need, what we have, what we expect. And they did that sizing plan based on all of that. And then at the end of the day, this is a doggone it. This is a layout of what the CBU site, stop moving. Okay. Basically, this is Gordon Pike down here at the bottom. The service center and its parking would be located on the south side here. And then as you go north, there would be additional parking for employee vehicles and city vehicles at the garage. So the new garage facility would be located up here. One of the things that we've also thought about is locating the state certified laboratory at the service center rather than at Dillman Road. The lab at Dillman Road is bursting at the seams, and we looked at a project to put some additional equipment there, and it was just infeasible because of the size of the site. So one of the thoughts we've had is to move the lab. This area here is the former trickling filter, this hatched area here. And this particular layout has no plan for what to do with that portion of the property. Presumably, it could be filled. Well, we know it can be filled, but the idea might be to fill it and leave it for future expansion. And then there would be a covered yard adjacent to the garage, so for things like castings and pipe and so forth. So we divide it that way. There would need to be access points. I believe these big black marks are access points for getting in and out. So the public couldn't just drive into the T&D garage, and you'd have to go through the access points to get to each of our facilities. So conceptually, this is what the layout would be.
So on this map, where we started our conversation, talking about the south of the berm,
Uh-huh.
that site would take up essentially about half of this.
It would take up to.
Quite a bit, like, because
you-
to me, this looks quite a bit smaller because this part's developed here, I guess, or cleared or whatever.
Well,
But
do you
there's
see,
really-
do you see the big square?
Yes.
This is the square.
Oh, that square.
So it would go,
Oh,
it would
okay.
basically go to the north edge of that square. So
Forward.
everything north of there would still be, all the way up to the berm would still be available for future expansion.
Okay, so the square to Gordon Pike.
Yeah,
Thank you, okay.
yeah.
I noticed that you mentioned the employee parking up north there, and then 58 spaces by the service center. Are some of those designated for employee as well?
Yeah, some of them would be designated park. So employees who work in the service center would park at the service
Okay,
center.
all right.
People who work at the garage would park at the
That was
garage.
a little confusing. That makes sense, though.
Yeah.
I may be jumping ahead to something that you might be potentially talking about, but, so this was done in as Megan pointed out, 2020, and work has changed. I mean, is everybody coming, I mean, I know the service guys, and I know all of that team, everybody's been coming into work. I mean, are people still working remotely? Is that something that CBU is planning to continue to do?
No, very few. There
Okay.
are only a couple of people who are in specific circumstances, typically owing to healthcare issues.
Sure.
There are very, very few people. Most of us are here every day. Some of us are here 4 days a week, but we're back in business. We're
Good.
back. We're all here.
I'm glad to hear that.
And when I remember Jason Bannock was on the board at the time we embarked on this study, and one of his skepticisms was that in forward years that we would be working here or whether we would be working from home. And the fact is, we're working here.
Good.
So I think that's pretty well established that we don't expect that to change.
And you don't expect that I mean, going forward, we want people to come into the office and,
Yes,
Perfect.
the city has a telework policy that we can make arrangements for someone to work remotely 1 day a week or 2 days a week if we, but that's between the employee, the supervisor, and the HR department. So,
okay,
but we don't have very many of those.
great.
I guess, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff?
Well, this is, so like backing up from this study, did anyone ever perform an analysis of alternatives to building a new building, such as if city utilities-only activities were here at this site, and hearing that the issues are, covered parking and storage of materials, was the alternative of just addressing those concerns either here or at the other site and not building a new building evaluated?
Yes, first of all,
Because that wasn't in the report.
okay, it could not be done here. There are just not enough square feet, so
Okay.
it can't be done here.
Of the covering the materials and
Yeah.
covering, right. So building that covered facility, the big covered area, just doing it, does it make sense to possibly just do that and not build a whole new building?
It creates logistical concerns. First of all, we're bursting at the seams in this building and in the garage.
Okay. I
So-
see a lot of people nodding their heads.
Yeah, so the problem is that we could build a garage, so we could go down there and build a garage and build a covered yard. Well, okay, you can do that, but then there's the garage that's attached to this building, but we're not using this garage, and it creates logistical log jams, right? People, we all work together, so we'd have people driving from here to Winston-Thomas to go to meetings. We'd have it would be a logistical concern. So it made more sense to do everything at once, because originally, when we started talking about this, my anticipation was that we'd build a yard and a garage. And then eventually we might build a service center, but we're bursting out of the service center too. And there are the city has other departments that are also bursting at their seams. So this was, it just seems that we're going to need to do a service center at some point or expand this one, but we
Yeah.
don't have space here
Yeah.
to do, there's no real estate to do it here. We
Right.
could- So-
It does become very important then, what allocation we get for the city for the use of this building.
And that would be part of the financial analysis that we'd have to do once we had an estimate, we had a better estimate of construction costs.
Yeah, but, I mean, to me, that precedes, moving ahead with a site plan and things like that, where you have a cost estimate for the whole facility. I mean, that would be, if my kids wanted to, do something like this, I would want to see more numbers up front in terms of the alternatives.
Yeah, that's an effort we can do.
Or the actual costs and things like how much money we're getting from the city. That would be my approach.
We were just discussing, there are some preliminary costs at the back, on the last page of the
Yes.
document, but nowhere on there does it say anything in terms of the question that you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand if there just are no alternatives, that's one thing, and we can set that aside. But then getting a realistic cost estimate and knowing that we can pay for that prior to proceeding with a site plan and however much that's gonna cost, I mean, that would make sense to me. I would wanna know that.
Okay.
I think there's gonna be a lot of numbers we're gonna wanna know before moving forward on such a large project.
There's a lot of chicken and egg in this.
Yeah.
And it's, you can't answer one question without the answer to the other question. And it doesn't matter which question you ask first, you're still going to be stuck. Because we can come up with a round number estimate based on what was in this report, which we think was a fair estimate at the time. But we don't know what that estimate would be today. So that would be a working number to work with, and then what arrangements would be made with the city would be another working number that we'd have to start looking into. But yeah, so we can start with that, but we really aren't in a position to negotiate anything until we know more at this point. So I'll speak with the controller about it.
Thank you.
Kirk, did you have a question too?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So is there anything else?
No, we'll continue conversations with downtown, try to put together some sort of an outline of what things are going to cost. I mean, the other challenge with all of this is the logistics of rate cases and, IURC has to approve any debt associated with this on the water side. It is a complicated project to put together. Regardless of what we do, it's a complicated project.
Do you know how much, so the utility board is leasing the land from the city of Bloomington here?
I don't think we are.
No?
No, we just hijacked it.
Okay. Okay, so, no, so the building belongs to the utility board, but the land belongs to the city, and so are you leasing the land that the building belongs on? Or
There had to have been an agreement at some point, but that would have been many years ago.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're leasing it for free right now?
I think so.
Okay, for
I
how
don't
long?
think we pay anything.
I don't know.
There is no, okay,
If there's an agreement, it's got to be 40 or 50 years old by now.
okay,
The original building was built in 1969.
okay. All right, so the city, okay. Okay.
And there used to be houses here.
There did? There used to be houses here.
There was a house right there on the corner before we burned.
Really?
So we've just had this familiar relation, we're like brother and sister type thing. We kind of work together, and it's kind of a trend that we've had.
Again, I think before we go much further, I'd like to have solid answers on all of these things, because we don't need to go spending a lot of money going one direction when, in the end, we can't do it. We can't do it, not because of money, not because of ratepayers, but because of ownership and.
Yeah, I think any ownership issues can be sorted out.
Perfect.
As Chris said, we're all still the same entity. The issue is who paid for what,
Right.
back when it was built. So it's that kind of an issue.
Yeah.
We have the same problem at Lake Lemon.
I have just one other
Go ahead,
comment,
Megan.
I guess. So, and I know this is not like designs or anything, but there's kind of a rough sketch of what would be where and everything. Do you feel like that meets the needs of now? Or does it anticipate future needs? I know, say, like at Dillman, we're nearing the completion of that project, but we already know what the next project is.
Right.
Can we get to a point where we don't anticipate there having to be another we can, if we're gonna do it, we would do it and it'd be done?
So this design was based on what we know and what we anticipate in the next 10 years or so. It's not based on an assumption of, we don't even know how big the city will be 30 years from now. So, but it does anticipate the fact that we may need to expand, and there would be more room on the site for future expansion.
And put in like the infrastructure underground to
Yeah,
do that, you know,
that would all
in
happen ahead of
anticipating
time.
like, oh, we're gonna add on later, but we'd already have that underground infrastructure in.
Yeah, where we
possibly.
need to, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just looking at the pictures, I can tell you if anything can improve it with all of the
Yes.
the garbage that's back there. Are we having any problems with homeless people coming back there, or?
No, that's
Well,
really
that's
not
good.
been an issue.
That's good.
At least it currently isn't,
I was gonna say at one time, but
yeah.
Go ahead, Kurt.
What year did we build this building?
This building was built in 2005,
it
6?
started out, I think we burned in 4, and we really started hitting it hard in 06.
It burned Thanksgiving weekend of 2003, 3 weeks after Mayor Kruzan was elected.
Yeah. And did we add square footage then? Does anybody remember?
We were pretty limited on the footprint. I don't think we really added much. The garage stayed. This building basically just went right into the footprint of the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, they wish they'd built it 2 stories when they built the new building, because they could have had a smaller footprint, and there would have been room to grow.
Yeah, you know, I'm always torn on these things. My experience has been that we've tried to, at least on the civil city side, when I was on the council, we tried to preserve taxpayer dollars as best we could. And that's not always the best solution, I've found. Sometimes you build things that you didn't plan very well for, and you try to conserve costs, and it bites you in the end. You have to remember that, city government, we hope, will be here for a long time. So it's kind of like the university. We need to build things that are going to last a long time and project where we're going to be in 30, 40, 50 years. We've not, there was a period of time in the 80s and 90s where we didn't do a very good job of that in the city. And I think this looks a little more forward leaning for us, planning for the future. I have just a little bit of concern, and I know that because I lived it. I've often said my first term on the city council, 88 through 91, I spent probably 60% of my time working on PCBs, and this was a hot place. And I would want to really be ironclad convinced that this is cleaned up to the max, because we don't want to go in a thing like that. When I was in county government, we were nervous about the ST Semicon site next to the courthouse. That would have been the perfect place to build onto the jail. But we got nervous because we were worried about the contamination, the possible contamination at the ST Semicon site because of all the industry that had happened. Lo and behold, you have a private sector contractor come in and puts up a, whatever it is, 8 or 10 story apartment complex, and we've never talked about what was on that site before, if anybody can even remember. But we were nervous at that point because of how the community had been really been in a bad place with the PCB contamination, and what it took for us to get out from under that. I think a lot of folks probably forget about that, but it was all consuming for city government for at least 8 years until we got all that solved. So I guess the point in that is, wow, this was a place that, there was a lot invested here to get it cleaned up. And before we move forward, I want to make sure that we're in a good spot there.
And I agree with you. The EPA came down here and met with us about the time that we were doing this master plan effort. And from EPA's perspective, we can redevelop the whole site. Now, I wouldn't want to put a school on the berm, but Yeah. Actually, you could build a road across it. You can build things on it. They told us. I would prefer we didn't. I would prefer that we leave that as is, or, or plant a solar array on it or something like that, but just not develop it as something where people are going to be working or living. But that was EPA's perspective. But, I agree with you, Kirk, when we've had a couple of situations recently where, I'm a groundwater scientist, so I'm acutely aware of this. Downtown, there are lots of places where if you dig deep enough, you're going to hit chlorinated solvents. When the voluntary remediation plans were done, they didn't drill that deep to find out what was down there. And I think that before we would proceed on something like this, we would definitely want to see what was in the soil. We would definitely want to look deeper. But EPA has certified the closure, so this site is no longer on the national priorities list. It's not under their jurisdiction at all anymore. And I was actually surprised when the EPA was here and told us how little restriction there is on our redevelopment of it. But I think we do need to be very cognizant of what the history of it is. But it's also there's also a lot of history there in terms of Bloomington's water and wastewater history, and it seems symbolic, if nothing else, for us to potentially reuse it for if we're going to reuse it, reusing it for utilities makes sense. So, but we do need to be very cognizant of what happened there in the 80s and 90s. And I was in grad school through most of that, and I was here too. Yeah.
Well, it's a city asset, and this is a whole lot. If it's in good enough shape, it's a whole lot better option than us, having to spend money for real estate someplace. And the other thing you need to think about is this the best use of this property? Because property is, as we know, at least inside the city limits now, we're in trouble. I mean, we've developed a lot. Now we're to the point where we're redeveloping. There's not much open space left. So lots to think about. But one thing we do know is we're going to need to be supplying water and wastewater competently and efficiently for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've got to make those best decisions.
Yes.
Go ahead, Megan.
So Vic, you mentioned from Kirk's comments about needing to do site testing again. Is that something that we should look into first then?
I'd like to talk, first I would talk, our local expert on these kinds of things is James, and I think James and I would want to look at what EPA is saying about the site, because I know that they've done a lot of testing and evaluation of the site. So James, do you know what they saw on the subsurface over there? We can investigate.
Yeah,
I think it's best we just look into it. But
Okay, thank you.
We might want to get, you mentioned selling those properties off with the frontage, which, hey, maybe that is the best use there. Ballpark estimate for that would come in handy to add to what we'd get for this building to offset the costs. I mean, if we can do that in a cost-effective manner,
Certainly would be
talking
worth
to an
looking at.
appraiser and, getting a couple ballpark estimates would be helpful, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I agree that if any of it was to be sold to a private entity, then we definitely would want to find out what parts of it would be viable and valuable for that activity.
Very good. Well, I think that speaking for the subcommittee, please keep us apprised, and if we have to have more of these meetings to kind of discuss more of the details, it's important that we hear what's going on here and see what input that we can potentially provide. As far as today, though, you said we do not have to do any type of resolution. Is it just proper to say to the board today that we're beginning these discussions, or would you like to have time to go over some of these details with the full board.
If the board wishes to know them, that would be, yeah, we'd be happy to do that. If you bring that up, I'm happy to comment on where we are at this point, which is trying to figure out what to do next. So what I'm hearing is we need to know more about the financial ramifications and how we would go about that. I think that's reasonable, and we can look into that. And we will, we will look into what architects would cost. We can do that in parallel, because and we'll bring it all together when we, when we start getting ready to look at an architect for a project like this. We definitely need to know, we need to know both. And the only estimate we have for cost is the one at the end of this report, but we don't have estimates for the rest of it. So we'll definitely pull that all together.
And then the third point too, in addition to the financials, is just the health of that area.
Yes.
And the safety of it. So, again, I think we're on the right track. We're not at a point right now where we can say, yes, we are going to put our stamp on it, move forward. But I'm really glad that we're looking at the options here.
This is definitely a 50 or 100-year project, because we can't be, one thing we know is that we can't continue to grow in this location. We're already bursting at the seams, and we're not taking care of our equipment as well as we could be, and we're going to have to find a spot. And as you brought up, Jeff, or I can't remember if you or Kirk brought up building one facility down there, but once you start building a garage, then it's going to have heat and air conditioning and all the other stuff. So once you start doing that, you're biting off all the site prep right then, which is a big part of a redevelopment project like this. So it's one of those things you can't tiptoe into. You really have to have a notion of where you're heading before you start.
Good. Well, if there aren't any more other questions, or presentations, I guess we can call this subcommittee to a close. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so moved, we adjourn.
Thank you. All right.